In California, the promises of high-speed rail were derailed, pun intended, after private consultants and corporations left that project unfinished. Public investment, of course, major part of President Biden's American Jobs Plan. But some are concerned after Democrats outsourced decision-making that private sector greed may be prioritized over real progress.
Friend of the show and executive editor at The American Prospect, David Dayen, joins us now to discuss how these dynamics threaten the promise of Biden's infrastructure plan. David, welcome.
Thanks for having me on again.
Well, can you just walk us through your report exactly? What happened in California and how do those dynamics reflect on something that could happen on a broader scale with a big scale infrastructure plan?
Well, California in the 2009 stimulus received several billion dollars, I believe $8 billion from the federal government to help to pay for this high-speed rail program. There were also bonds that were available. The cost of this doubled within about 10 years, and it was really a case of runaway consultants. That's who essentially managed the program. We have a lack of long-term planning capacity in this country. It's not just the infrastructure you think about, like roads and bridges and stuff, but the infrastructure to build infrastructure is lacking in America. And as a result, you get these high-priced consultants who, are very skilled in the ways of costing up a program, and it's the fear is that we put hundreds of billions of dollars into reconstructing and building America, and too much of it goes into the treasury of McKinsey.
Yeah, and we had actually Matt Stoller on, who you name check in this piece too, who ran down the dynamics in Puerto Rico and how McKinsey, just has taken gobs of government cash and not accomplished a whole lot. And his basic point was like, keep McKinsey far away from the infrastructure package. What are some of the worrying signs that you are seeing here right now?
Well, I think there's been basically an incomplete when it comes to corporate power in the Biden administration. Obviously, what's been appreciated is throwing away sort of the concerns about deficits and going big on spending. But we have no real sense of how this administration is going to attack things like privatization, things like corporate power. There have been a couple promising hires. Some of them haven't been confirmed yet. Other positions are incomplete, and I think that's a precursor to how the Biden administration is going to look at infrastructure in terms of whether the public sector will dominate or whether the private sector will.
It's interesting because we know that in a lot of cases, private businesses can take on these projects and do them more efficiently than government can. And I wonder what you think then the solution is to the problem here. Is there a policy? Maybe it's a revolving door issue. The DOT secretary right now is Pete Buttigieg, who worked at McKinsey.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a policy solution that can balance, sort of the way that private companies are able to accomplish some of these projects with government oversight? Is anybody talking about something that could fix this problem?
Well, I don't know that the private sector can perform these projects more efficiently than government can. That's sort of the story from industry. But the fact is that they have to build in a layer of profit to make it worthwhile to them. And that every dollar that goes to that isn't going toward the actual service. And that means either cuts to labor, it means cuts to safety and maintenance, it means a whole host of degradations from what the public service could be. And the sort of compensation for this was that government can be infinitely more efficient. But I think that in the current environment, that's being disproven over and over again with respect to privatization projects. So I would say that what we need is a robust and vibrant public sector. The private sector is always going to be in the mix in terms of subcontracting, in terms of design, not necessarily design, but building the physical products. We don't have people who are construction workers on the government payroll necessarily, but there are ways to build guardrails around that so that the decision-making process is public. And that's the real key here.
I think that's an important distinction. David, one of the things that your piece actually got me thinking about, which is relevant but also a little bit of a side issue, is Democrats have been using the reconciliation process basically exclusively to get big things done. That's what probably the infrastructure bill, if it gets through, is going to be through reconciliation. If they do the next piece of the Build Back Better plan that we're just getting, some sort of nascent details on, that would also have to go through reconciliation. But it is a really limiting tool. I mean, it does mean, especially since they're taking the word of the Senate parliamentarian as gospel, it does mean that certain things with regards to corporate power, with regards to voting rights, with regard potentially to union rights, are essentially impossible to accomplish because you're never going to get the Republicans on the table. Talk about some of the limits of that approach versus ditching the filibuster.
Well, there certainly are limitations there. With respect to this particular plan, you can certainly do things in procurement. You can do it by executive action to say that, we're not going to hire any company that doesn't allow its members to be part of a union and engages in union neutrality. You don't even need legislation to do that, for example. I think that while this isn't so much of a limiting factor within this broader infrastructure package, because it's ultimately about spending money and where that money gets spent, I do think that there are limitations that you described with respect to voting rights and the like. And I don't know that the Senate Democratic Caucus has really figured out a way forward on that. It may be that they need to bang their head against the wall a couple times to see that Republicans really aren't interested in the same priorities and making any compromises before they move forward and try to find some other method.
Really interesting piece, David. Thank you so much. Great to have you.
All right, thanks.
Next up, Ryan Grimm and a CMBS expert are going to tell us about how banks are contributing to a pandemic-fueled real estate market bubble. They're going to dig into the details of that when Rising returns.